I didn't set out to orchestrate a disaster, but I didn't exactly try to stop it either. Picture this. Someone rolls onto your private lakeside land, uninvited, and starts building 66 luxury condos without so much as a handshake. Now layer on a memory from 2 decades ago, when this very ground was swallowed by 8 feet of muddy water. You stop thinking like a homeowner and start feeling like a silent bystander, watching nature, karma, or maybe just irony take the wheel. My name's Henry Caldwell, and this is how I went from a retired guy with a fishing boat to the neighbor who sipped coffee on his porch while an entire development sank. Before I dive into how it all unraveled, I want to know, what would you have done in my shoes? For 20 years, I'd lived the kind of retirement most folks only dream about. My cozy log cabin sat on 2 acres of prime waterfront along Lake Serenity, Texas, a slice of paradise where the only sounds were birdsong and the gentle lap of water. I'd left my career as an insurance adjuster behind, content to fish, read, and keep to myself. That tranquility shattered one Tuesday morning in March when the rumble of heavy machinery broke the silence of my dead-end road. At first, I thought it was just county roadwork or a neighbor's septic install. Then I saw the convoy. Pickup trucks hauling surveying gear, a sleek black BMW that screamed money, and enough construction equipment to level a small city. Out stepped Margaret Langston, looking like she'd just strode off the set of a corporate drama. She wore a tailored suit that probably cost more than my monthly pension, clutched a leather portfolio thick enough to stop a bullet, and flashed a smile that could charm a snake. "Good morning, Henry," she called, as if we were old pals instead of strangers standing in my driveway. "I'm Margaret Langston, president of the Serenity Shores Homeowners Association. I trust you received our letter about the exciting new development we're launching on your property." I nearly spit out my coffee. Development? On my land. I watched, dumbfounded, as her crew started unloading equipment like they owned the place. "Ma'am, there's been a mistake. This is private property property. You can't just show up and start building." Her smile turned sharp, like a predator sizing up prey. "Oh, Henry dear," she said, the word dear slithering off her tongue like venom. "Did you actually read your 2003 purchase contract?" The question hit me like a punch to the gut. I hadn't read every page of that contract. Who does? It was a legal tome thicker than a Bible, written in jargon that might as well have been Sanskrit. Of course I read it. I lied, but my voice betrayed me, cracking like dry wood. Margaret flipped open her portfolio with a flourish, revealing a highlighted paragraph on page 23. Subsection 4.7, she declared. The HOA retains development rights to 60% of all waterfront properties for community enhancement projects. I stared at the words, willing them to morph into something less damning. Me, the guy who'd spent 30 years dissecting other people's contracts, had missed the fine print in my own. "That can't be legal," I stammered, but Margaret was already pulling out permits, environmental reports, and architectural plans. "It's ironclad, Henry," she said, her voice dripping with mock sympathy. "Don't feel bad, most people skip the fine print. That's why I'm in charge and you're, well, our neighbor. We're building 66 luxury condos, and we break ground next month. Think of it as progress for your little corner of heaven." As her crew hammered stakes around my century-old pecan tree, I stood frozen, my world unraveling. 20 years of peace, gone in a single conversation. Orange spray paint marked my trees for removal, and a nagging memory tugged at my mind, something about this land, something I'd forgotten. But it slipped away like a fish off the hook. The next 2 weeks were hell. I barely slept, barely ate, and spent every waking hour on the phone with lawyers or digging through old paperwork. My first call was to Jim Harper, a local attorney who'd handled a neighbor's divorce. He skimmed my contract, shook his head, and slid it back. "Henry, this is airtight as a vault. You signed it, it's filed, and the HOAs followed every rule." A second lawyer said the same, just with fancier words and a bigger bill. Desperate, I drove to City Hall, hoping someone could explain how an HOA could hijack private land. The clerk, bored and overworked, recited her script. "The HOA has all permits, passed all inspections, and their documents are in order. The city can't interfere in private contracts." Meanwhile, Margaret's crews didn't waste a second. Every morning at 7 a.m., diesel engines roared down my road. By week's end, They'd cleared a swath of forest the size of a football field, including my pecan tree, its pieces hauled off like cheap firewood. Watching from my kitchen window, I felt something break inside me, a wound that never quite healed. But Margaret wasn't done. She launched a campaign of petty harassment that would have made a dictator blush. 3 days after my tree was gone, an HOA notice appeared on my door. My grass was 3 inches tall, violating a new 2.5-inch limit. Fine, $50. The next day, my fishing boat docked at the same spot for 5 years was cited for a new 48-hour watercraft rule. By week 2, I'd racked up $400 in fines for rules that didn't exist a month ago. One Thursday, staring at a citation for my bird feeder's unauthorized wildlife attraction, I snapped. I stood up, knocking over my chair, and kicked a box of HOA notices. It tipped, spilling papers across the floor. In the chaos, it knocked over an old photo box, and 20 years of memories scattered like confetti. One photo stopped me cold. My cabin in 1995, surrounded by water, like it was floating in the middle of a lake. Trees stood half submerged, the dock invisible under 8 feet of floodwater. The Great Flood of 1995. How had I forgotten? Lake Serenity had risen to biblical levels, turning the area into an inland sea. And here was Margaret, building condos in the exact spot that had drowned 30 years ago. My hands shook as I dialed her number. "Henry, how lovely to hear from you," she chirped, all sugar and venom. "I hope this isn't about those notices. Rules are rules, you know." I took a deep breath. "Margaret, I've been thinking. You're right. Fighting this is pointless and stressful. Build your condos. I won't cause trouble, I'll even help." Silence stretched so long I thought she'd hung up. Then, "That's wonderful, Henry. I'm thrilled you see the benefits this will bring. I was betting everything on a 30-year-old memory, on photos that might show a freak event. What if I was wrong? What if I was letting them ruin my land for nothing?" The next morning, I walked to the construction site with a thermos of coffee and a smile I hoped looked genuine. The foreman, a weathered guy named Tom, seemed relieved to meet a neighbor who wasn't spitting venom. "Look, Tom," I said, pouring him a cup. "This project's happening, so I might as well help with some local know-how." When Margaret arrived for her daily inspection, she found me chatting with the crew like old friends. Her eyebrows shot up, but she recovered fast. "Henry, how delightful to see you embracing progress," she said, suspicion lurking beneath her smile. I shrugged, playing defeated. "Like I told you, fighting was making me miserable. If you're building, I'll help make it right." She bought it, hook, line, and sinker, soon treating me like a local expert. "Henry, you've lived here 20 years, she'd say. Where do buyers want to live? What features sell?" I told the truth. When she asked about prime locations, I said, "People want to be as close to the water as possible. That flat shore area is gold. For features, folks love basements. Great for storage, cool in summer, perfect for entertaining. On timing, summer's best buyers want to settle before the rainy season in late July." I didn't mention why these were popular. Nobody expects a flood, basements become pools, and rain comes like clockwork. Margaret never asked about flood risks, and I didn't volunteer. Was it my job to do her homework? Within weeks, she was calling me her local consultant, overriding her engineer's advice when it clashed with my insights. One morning, her engineer, a sharp guy named Paul, warned, "Ms. Langston, these elevation readings are lower than expected. We should raise the foundations 18 inches for safety." Margaret waved him off. "Paul, Henry's lived here 20 years. He says buyers want to be on the water, not above it. That's what sells." Paul tried again, but she shut him down. Luxury is about feeling the lake, not hiding from it. From my porch, I watched, coffee in hand, as she ignored warnings that could have saved her. By June, 50 of the 66 units had foundations poured at the lake's lowest points, exactly where I'd suggested for maximum appeal. The irony was almost too perfect. Margaret turned the Serenity Shores project into her personal monument, a stepping stone to city council. She planned a grand opening fit for a queen, a massive tent, Austin caterers, the mayor, and half the county's elite. Over 300 guest buyers, agents, media swarmed the site. Margaret, in a pristine white suit, worked the crowd like a pro, posing for photos and pitching the future of Texas lakefront living. Her presentation was a masterclass in corporate polish. Serenity Shores is engineered for luxury and safety, she declared, standing by a model unit. Our flood protection systems are rated for 500-year storms. We've studied 30 years of weather data and invested in state-of-the-art drainage. The crowd roared with applause. I'd planned to stay home, but her claim about 30 years of data pushed me over the edge. I grabbed a manila envelope from my desk filled with those 1995 flood photos and walked to the event, smiling like a good neighbor. MS. Langston, I called as she posed for another photo. Congrats on this project. I brought some historical photos from my collection, thought folks might enjoy a peek at local history. I handed her the envelope, containing 8 stark images of the 1995 flood, my cabin half submerged, the marina underwater, trees marked by water lines where condos now stood. The crowd buzzed as she opened it, passing the photos around. When was this? A buyer demanded, pointing at the ground. This spot was underwater. August 1995, I said cheerfully. The Great Flood. The lake rose higher than anyone thought possible. Questions erupted. Shouldn't we have been told? Margaret's face paled, but she rallied, stepping onto her stage. Folks, don't let these old photos scare you. That was 30 years ago, ancient history. Modern engineering makes this impossible today. Her confidence worked. The crowd calmed, contracts were signed, and I was brushed off as a grumpy old-timer. But as I walked home, my phone pinged, a weather alert. A tropical system was brewing in the Gulf, promising heavy rain in 10 days. I stared at it, heart pounding. Had I just set the stage for disaster? The storm hit like a freight train. What started as light rain became a deluge, stalling over central Texas. Meteorologists scrambled to explain why their models failed. By day 2, torrential rain overwhelmed drainage systems. 8 units had water in their basements. Margaret's social media went silent, her BMW racing between crisis meetings. By day 3, the lake rose 8 feet, matching 1995. 45 units were flooded, their first floors turned into muddy pools. Margaret's final live stream was the nail in her coffin. Broadcasting from a second-floor unit, she tried to downplay the chaos. This is a temporary event, she said, voice strained. Our insurance will handle. A thunderous crack cut her off as the model unit's foundation collapsed, water surging in. Her panic was broadcast live, furniture floating past as she scrambled to end the stream. From my porch, I watched the devastation unfold. Cars floated like toys, a neon Serenity Shores sign bobbed in the current. Emergency crews fought heroically, but nature's laws were non-negotiable. As families loaded soggy belongings into trucks, I felt no triumph, just a hollow ache. I'd been right, but at what cost? The investigation was brutal. Adjusters uncovered Margaret's fraud. She'd scrubbed flood data from reports, editing out environmental risks to secure permits. Worse, she'd embezzled $400,000 from the HOA's disaster fund to bankroll her campaign. Emails showed her ordering the streamlining of reports, betting engineering could defy nature. The community erupted. At a packed meeting, residents confronted her. "You sold my mom a death trap," one woman screamed. Margaret cracked, admitting she knew the flood risk but thought it wouldn't happen during my timeline. Her words, recorded and shared, sealed her fate. She was arrested on fraud, embezzlement, and negligence charges, sentenced to 18 months in prison, and banned from public office. The HOA went bankrupt, and the land was declared a permanent flood zone. My property rights were restored, the contract nullified. 6 months later, Lake Serenity is pristine, reborn as Serenity Natural Preserve. I'm a local historian now, advising on flood preparedness. But guilt gnaws at me. Those families weren't my enemies, they were regular folks chasing a dream. I showed them the photos, but maybe I could have shouted louder. Or maybe I shouldn't have played the game at all. I sit on my porch, watching the lake, and wonder, was I a villain or just an old man with a long memory? The water doesn't carry it, just waits. What would you have done? Did I go too far, or not far enough?